Come on into the building, family. Hey, I got some powerful knowledge for you. Please hit that subscribe button and let's get into it in a few minutes. Why were blacks considered 3/5 of a human? Let's talk about it right after the intro.
You are now tuned in to Real Truth and Power, the show that uplifts the community with health, wealth, and knowledge of self. Here's your host, Everett Winchester.
All right, peace and blessings, family. Again, welcome to the Real Truth and Power Live podcast, where we provide powerful content to uplift the black community with health, wealth, and knowledge of self. Why were the blacks considered 3/5 of a human? Well, it's crazy. It was to settle a battle between the northern and the southern states. In 1820, the southern states wanted to bring Missouri into the Union as a slave-owning state. Now, the northern states were fearing this because they felt that if Missouri became a southern state and a slave-owning state, that the South would outnumber the North. Here's where it gets crazy. The southern states, of course, had more slaves than the northern states. Back then, of course, slaves were considered personal property, like your house, like your land, and the slave owners did not want to pay personal taxes on their property, meaning the slaves. Here's where it gets a little crazy. The southern states wanted their slaves to be counted as voters, even though they weren't going to vote, even though they weren't allowed to vote. Why? Because that meant that the slaves would be counted into the population of the state. Now, I want you to think about this. The more electoral college votes you have when it comes to a presidential election is deemed necessary by your population. Meaning, and I hope I explained that well, the more heavy a population a state is, the more electoral college votes they get. So what the North and the South did was they came up in 1820 with what I would call it, the Missouri Compromise. Basically in 1820, Missouri was allowed into the Union as a slave-holding state with the compromise between the North and the South. So to me, the southern states really got over in this compromise. The southern states would not have to pay taxes on the slaves, and they could count them as part of the population because they were considered 3/5 of a human. So they couldn't vote, but they were allowed to be part of the South's population. This is the slick part by the founding fathers. These dudes have a powerful penmanship. This is where it gets slick. By allowing the slaves to be considered 3/5 of a human, they didn't have to mention slavery in that Constitution. So here's how the 1820 Missouri Act really hurt and affected black people back then and now. One, it allowed Missouri to have slaves. They came in and they were able to own slaves. Two, it allowed blacks to be part of the population, which gave more southern states power. And three, it established the electoral college rule over the popular vote. Now, how does this affect us today? Think about it. It doesn't matter how many votes a person has, it goes on to the electoral college. So when it was time to determine presidents, the more popular the states were, as far as population, the more population the states had, the more electoral votes they had. Now let's go into Donald Trump. He didn't win the popular vote, but he won the electoral vote. And this is how a lot of the southern states win. And this is how a lot of the southern states get their presidents elected, by the electoral college vote. So that's really crazy to think about how that one little rule affected politics and everything else, man. So we really got to look deep into the system we're in and everything else. I hope those were little tidbits to just make you aware why we were considered 3/5 of a human. Please drop your comments, and if I missed something or I misspoke on something, I'd love to hear from you. And if you like the information, please hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, because we're coming up with a lot more powerful information. Peace and blessings, man, and stay tuned for more. We out.